Good morning, all of you. Any questions from whatever is covered yesterday? I told you to go to your mechanics of materials, any of the standard textbook, and you revise your concepts of this theory of pure bending. Okay. So let me So this is what we covered in yesterday's class. We noted what is the sign convention here. Once again, I am emphasizing sign convention is very important, because whatever results finally we get, when we want to make interpretation out of those results for internal shears and internal moments, or if you want to draw bending moment shear force diagrams, you're required to be careful with the sign convention that you follow. Okay, so this sign convention is very much important, and if you had noted down, you please make a note of it. And also we noted these relations, and also we noted moment curvature relation, this moment curvature relation, and based on this moment curvature relation and relationship between bending moment shear force and applied external force, this is what you can write, and this is going to be your governing differential equation, connecting moment with this moment with the applied load. Okay, this is nothing but EI times curvature is nothing but your moment, and this is a fourth order differential equation. 4 boundary conditions are required to solve this, and these 4 boundary conditions can be any combination of this. Okay, so you please make a note of this. Before that, everything is fine. Any questions? So take a note of this one, governing differential equation. And yesterday I was mentioning that to understand all this, you refer a standard mechanics of materials book. And if you go and check your this standard book like Gere, James Gere, okay, and you just these are the kind of books you need to follow. And then if you see this, all these relations are given here. How this relation is obtained, moment curvature relation, and when you do integration, this is what you get, and that is what exactly we have noted here. That is exactly what we have noted here. Okay, so what I suggest is you follow some standard mechanics of materials book if these concepts are not clear to you. And with that, what I want to do is I want to proceed with our development of finite element equations. Okay, so this is the governing differential equation, and if you want to develop finite element equations, first step you need to follow is either you adopt variational approach or Galerkin approach, and derive all the equations. Okay, So here, let's follow a variational approach. So this is a starting point, governing differential equation. In variational approach, what is the procedure? The governing differential equation is going to be multiplied with the variation of quantity that we are trying to approximate, which is going to be your transverse displacement. So multiply this differential equation with variation of E, integrate over the problem domain, integrate from x1 to x2. X1 corresponds to the starting of that element, x2 corresponding to the ending of that element. Okay, so with that, let's start. And whatever we are going to get, it is what is called potential energy functional. Potential energy functional. And if you don't want to go through it, here for completeness, we are going through all this. Or if you directly, or you can write this potential energy functional directly if you are familiar with structural mechanics concepts. Potential energy, I already told you earlier, it is strain energy minus work done by the applied forces. Here strain energy is due to bending, so you need to have, or you need to take bending strain energy. Strain energy that you need to consider is bending strain energy, and work done by the applied forces. What are the applied forces? Transverse loads and moments and shears if they are ready. Okay, or otherwise we can start from fundamentals of this variational approach and derive the equation. So that is what is actually followed here. Given differential equation is multiplied with variation of transverse displacement integrated from x1 to x2. And earlier, when I was explaining for beam problem, somebody asked, what if in a problem we need to apply integration by parts 2 times to reduce the order of differentiation. At that time, I told that we are going to do it in case of beams, so you will see that now. So this is, you see here inside the bracket already it is second derivative of, this is second derivative of transverse displacement. Over that second derivative, you are taking 2 more times derivative, so it's a 4th order derivative. And this equation is for a general case where E and I are functions of x. If E and I are constant over the length of the beam, then you can take this EI outside the integral and outside the differentiation and outside the integral. EI is nothing but your flexural rigidity. Flexural rigidity of beam is given by E times I. So this whatever equation system we are deriving, that is going to be more general. So EI is kept inside the differentiation and integration. And then integration by parts is applied once to reduce the order of differentiation. And when you apply integration by parts one time over this first term, when you apply integration by parts, it's going to result in 3 terms. It's going to result in 3 terms. And this second term is written as it is. So please take a note of it. Please take a note of it. If you have any questions, you can raise that at this stage. When you apply first one time integration by parts, this is what you get. And still, if you after applying integration by parts, again here I told you this is second derivative already. Over that you are taking one more time derivative. Okay, over that you are taking one more time. Sorry, here this is already second derivative. Over that you are taking one more time derivative. You can apply integration by parts once again over this term. Integration by parts once again over this term. Okay. So when you apply integration by parts over this term, over this term, it's going to again result in 3 terms, and they are written here. Please note that when I say 3 terms, already 2 terms are inside here, because this whatever is there inside this square bracket, you need to evaluate it upper limit and lower limit. Here you need to evaluate this at x1 and x2. Here also x1 and x2. So 2 terms are here, and in addition you get one more term, third term. So this term is going to result, when you apply integration by parts, it's going to result in 3 terms. So when you apply integration by parts second time, this is what you get. And once again, what is the idea of integration by parts? The idea of integration by parts is, instead of integrating or differentiating a particular quantity more number of times, we can transfer the differentiation to the other term. Okay, so that is the idea of this integration by parts, and by doing it, the demand on the trial solution is going to reduce. The starting order of trial solution, whatever order of trial degree of trial solution that you start with, demand on that is going to reduce when you reduce the order of differentiation on the quantity that you are trying to find. Okay, so this is one time when you apply integration by parts. This is second time when you apply integration by parts. So now you can look at this, and you can make a note, something you already know it. Moment is EI times second derivative of transverse displacement. That is noted. And if you take one more time derivative on that, that means derivative of moment is going to give you shear. So all these quantities are noted here, because to further simplify this, we are required to note down all this. We need to understand what each of these terms stand for. And also you have this kind of term here. You have this kind of term. And if you go back to your variational concepts, this in fact, this term is nothing but variation of half EI times second derivative of V with respect to X square of that. So please take a note of this. So wherever this quantity is there, you substitute M, and wherever this quantity is there, you substitute V, and wherever this quantity is there, you substitute this one. And what is V? V is transverse displacement, and derivative of V with respect to X, that is nothing but slope. So basically, variation of V is nothing but variation of transverse displacement evaluated at x1 and x2, variation of slope evaluated at x1 and x2. That you need to keep in mind. And I also told you, wherever you apply essential boundary condition at that location, wherever you apply essential boundary condition at that location, this variation of admissible solution is going to be 0 at that location. Okay, and please note that for beam problem you have two essential boundary conditions. One is transverse displacement, another is slope or rotation. One is transverse displacement, another one is rotation. And if transverse displacement and rotation are specified at a particular location. Let's say if it is a fixed beam, rotation as well as transverse displacement are going to be 0 at both ends. So both rotation and transverse displacement are going to be specified. If rotation and transverse displacements are specified at that particular location, variation of V and variation of derivative of V are going to be 0. Okay, so that you need to keep in mind. That is what we are going to apply here. I hope you have taken note of this equation. I hope you have taken note of this notation. So let's go further. Now you plug in all this information here. You plug in all this information here. Variation of V. This quantity is nothing but internal shear. This quantity is nothing but internal moment, and this quantity is this one. So plugging in all this information, this equation, last equation here is going to reduce to this. Last equation there is going to reduce to this one. And this first equation is looking like a variation of V plus variation of U, or variation of U plus variation of V. So it can be written as variation of U plus V. So that is what is done here. And also variation symbol and integration symbol are interchangeable. So it is variation symbol is taken out of the integral. Any questions here? Any questions? So now to proceed further, in developing the equations, we can apply, or we need to assume some boundary conditions, essential boundary conditions. Okay, and so we can try to understand the procedure for deriving the element equations, assuming that at both ends, that is at x1 and x2, rotation, transverse displacement as well as rotations are specified, so that we can eliminate these two terms. So that is what is written here. V and derivative of V with respect to x are specified at either end. That is like a particular case. Okay, that is a particular case, and once you understand the procedure, you can relax this. Once you specify those quantities at both ends, at x1 and x2, then the admissible trial solution must then be such that their variation at the corresponding ends be 0. So these two terms get eliminated, you will be left with only this term. That is what is written. So nicely you got something like a variation of something inside the bracket is equal to 0. So whatever is there inside the bracket, that is nothing but your potential energy functional. That is nothing but your potential energy functional. And you please cross check. Whatever definition of potential energy, whether it is this equation is in agreement with that or not. Potential energy is strain energy minus work done by the applied forces. Strain energy is whatever strain energy we are considering here is bending strain energy. You go back and see, you go back to your mechanics of materials standard textbook and check what is bending strain energy. Bending strain energy is given by this one. Half E I times second derivative of V with respect to x whole square of second derivative of V with respect to x. So this is bending strain energy term. And what about the load, transverse load applied? Load applied is transverse load. So load times transverse displacement integrated from x1 to x2. That is going to be your work done by the applied external load. So this is this functional you can directly write without going through all this procedure if you are good in structural mechanics concepts. Okay. So this is going to be your potential energy functional when the transverse displacement as well as rotations are specified at both ends. That I told you, that kind of assumption we made to understand the procedure. So now let's relax that. It's not necessary all the time. That's going to be valid only, let's say, for a fixed beam. If it is a cantilever beam, at one end the rotation and transverse displacement and rotation are going to be zero, but at the other end they are not going to be zero. So we need to relax that. Okay, so that we will see. So this is the case when essential boundary conditions are specified. Essential boundary conditions for beam problem are transverse displacements as well as rotations. When essential boundary conditions are specified at either end, this is the potential energy function. And we will see the other extreme case. Other extreme is when natural boundary conditions are specified at both ends. When natural boundary conditions are specified at both ends, then these two terms are going to be there. Then we'll see how to simplify these equations. Okay, please take a note of it. I'm going to wait for a minute here. Okay, so now when natural boundary conditions are specified at both ends, what do you mean by natural boundary conditions? That means you are assuming that the shear V and M are specified at either end. And then read this. In practice, nodal forces and moments are prescribed at the beam ends rather than internal shear and internal moments. Because of different sign convention for applied forces and internal forces, we need to make a relation. We need to make a note of relation between internal forces and moments and applied forces and moments. Let the applied forces and moments be applied forces at both ends be F1 and F2. Applied moments at both ends be M1, M2. And internal shear, internal moment, let them, these, whatever you see here, they are internal shear, internal moment. So this is the sign convention for internal shear, internal moment. Internal shear at this node 1 is V1, internal shear at node 2 is V2, internal moment at node 1 is M1, internal moment at node 2 is M2. Okay, so here, just a minute, what I suggest is, if you have not taken a note of this one, that's why I'm emphasizing again and again, you need to take a note of this sign convention. You can see here, applied moments are going to be positive or applied forces are going to be positive if at both ends, applied forces are going to be positive if at both ends they are acting in the upward direction. Whereas moments, applied moments are going to be positive if at both ends, moment is in the counterclockwise direction. With that, you need to keep a note of this. Now, because we need to write a relationship between internal moments, internal forces, and applied forces and moments. Internal moments and internal shear. And sign convention for internal moments is at the left end, moment should be clockwise. At the right end, moment should be anti-clockwise or counterclockwise. Internal shear at the left end, it should be directed in the upward direction. At the right end, shear should be directed in the downward direction. So now you can see what is the relation between this and this. Here, this moment, if the moment, applied moment is acting like this, and it's going to be negative of this one. Okay. So what did we use the notation for applied forces? Applied forces F1, F2. So first let's look at only applied forces and internal shear. F1, F2. And here it's V1, V2. F1 is acting in the same direction as V1. So if you want to express applied forces in terms of internal shear, F1 or V1 is going to be same as F1. V1 here is going to be same as F1. And here V2 is going to be minus F2. V2 is going to be minus F2. And what about applied moments? Let's say applied moment, this is M1, this is M2. Internal moment here is like this, here is like this. So this M1 applied moment is going to be related to the internal moment at this end with a negative sign appended. Whereas this moment here is going to be same as this one. So please make a note of this. Okay. So with this understanding, you can easily write this one, these relations. So once you have these relations, you can plug in into this equation. V evaluated at x1, V evaluated at x2, M evaluated at x1, M evaluated at x2. So plug in all this information into that equation, you get this one. Quickly take a note of this. Any questions here? Any questions? And you see the last equation is nothing but this is a variation of V multiplied by some F2. F2 is like a constant. So variation operator is going to act only on V. Similarly, variation operator is going to act only on V in the second term. And variation operator is going to act only on the, variation operator is only going to act on the slope term or the derivative of V term. In the third, this one. In the third term, it's going to act only on this. In fourth term also, it's going to act on derivative of V. So, so this is something like a variation of some quantity plus variation of some quantity plus variation of some quantity. Like that, there are 5 quantities. So all these you can put them inside the bracket and take variation operator out. So then if you do that, you are going to get this equation. And this is, from this equation you can write this functional potential energy function. If the loads and moments are applied at either end, then potential energy is given by this one. This is also straightforward. If you know the structural mechanics concepts, you can write this easily. Again, this is potential energy. Here it is strain energy, this bending strain energy minus work done by the transverse distributed load, and you applied for this particular case point loads. Load multiplied by displacement, moment multiplied by rotation or slope. Again, load multiplied by displacement at second node, moment multiplied by rotation at the second node. So this gives you the work done by the applied moments and forces, or applied done by forces and moments. So potential energy is strain energy minus work done by the applied forces. This is also minus here, this is also minus. All the details are explained here. Bending strain energy, beam bending strain energy is the first term. Work done by the distributed load is this term. Work done by the applied end loads at node 1, node 2, that is given by this. So finally, potential energy is strain energy minus work done by the applied forces. Okay. So two cases. One, if at both ends essential boundary conditions are specified, how to get the potential energy functional. Second case, if at both ends natural boundary conditions are specified, how to get the potential energy functional. And why we discussed both these cases? Because if you take a long beam, you are going to discretize that into many number of elements, internal elements. For internal elements, the potential energy functional looks like this. Okay? And if the entire beam, let's say the entire beam you take as one element and that beam is fixed, then potential energy functional is going to look like this. So this equation is more general. This equation is more general. So now we got potential energy functional. Still we did not get the finite element equations for a beam element. Element equation for a beam element still we did not get. This is only potential energy functional. So what is the next step? We need to substitute. If you recall what we did for beam problem, or sorry, what we did for a bar problem, once we got the potential energy functional, we substituted finite element approximation of displacements, N transpose D, and finite element approximation of derivative of displacement, B transpose D. And then we simplified, and then we applied the stationarity conditions. Then only we got the finite element equation. Same procedure here. Same procedure. Now we need to substitute finite element approximation of V, finite element approximation of derivative of V, which is nothing but your slope. But finite element approximation, we need to know what are the shape functions for that. If it is a bar element, two-node bar element, we know the shape functions. So at that time we have written N transpose D, B transpose D, making use of those shape functions. But now for a beam element, still we don't know the shape functions. So now before we proceed further, we need to derive the shape functions for beam element. We need to derive shape function for beam element. Here the procedure is explained for a two-node beam element. most of the commercial software or whatever software you see, which is all commercialized, available, okay, under different trade names. In all those software, beam element, you only have 2-node beam element, okay. Whenever you say beam element, it's going to be 2-node only in all this commercial software. But if you understand the procedure, you can derive for 3-node beam element, 4-node beam element as well. Okay. So let's understand the procedure for 2-node beam element. How to get the shape functions. So for that, you please take a note of this figure. This is a beam element. For generality, the cross section is shown as varying. This is node 1 of that element. Node 1 is located at x1. Node 2 is located at x2. Okay. Length of this beam element is L. Length of this beam element is L. And transverse displacement at the first node is V1. Transverse displacement at second node is V2. Rotation at first node is θ1. Rotation at second node is θ2. Please see here, sign convention. This sign convention coincides with the sign convention for applied forces and moments. Applied forces at both ends, applied forces are going to be positive if they're acting in the upward direction. At both ends, moments are going to be positive if moments are acting in counterclockwise or anti-clockwise direction. Similarly here, V1, V2 are positive in the upward direction. That is the sign convention we are following. And θ1, θ2 are going to be positive in the counterclockwise direction or anti-clockwise direction. Please take a note of this beam element. There are no questions. I hope you are following. If you have any questions, please let me know. And this beam element, bar element of length, bar element, what we did is bar element of length L, where the first node is x1, second node is x2. What we did is we mapped onto a S coordinate system. We mapped bar element, actual bar element, to a parent bar element having 2 units length, where that parent element goes from S is equal to -1 to S is equal to 1. Similar kind of mapping we are also going to do for this beam element, but instead of going from -1 to 1, here we are going to map it to a parent element which goes from S is equal to 0 to S is equal to 1. So this entire beam element we are going to map onto a parent element of length 1 unit. So what is that relation? What is that mapping? What is that mapping? That mapping relation is given by this one. In S coordinate system is defined such a way, S coordinate system is defined such a way, S is equal to 0 here, S is equal to 1 here. So that relation is given by this. The relationship between S local coordinate system and global coordinate system, or S coordinate system and X coordinate system. And if you are not convinced with this, first of all, how this equation is derived? How this equation is derived? I told you the procedure to derive the equation relationship between S coordinate, X coordinate while explaining for 2-node bar element. When I am explaining the procedure for mapping for 2-node bar element, I explained to you how that relation between S and X can be obtained, making use of linear interpolation relation or equation of a straight line y minus y1 is equal to y2 minus y1 divided by x2 minus x1 multiplied by x minus x1. And wherever y is there, replacing y with s, and wherever y1 is there, replacing that with minus 1, y2 with minus 2. Sorry, y2 with 1. That is for bar element. That is the procedure I told for bar element. Same procedure you can apply for this beam element as well to get this relation. Only thing is, wherever y is there, replace that with yes. Wherever y1 is there, you replace with 0. Wherever y2 is there, replace with 1. And if you do that, you get this relation. And once you get this relation, is this relation correct or not? You please check it. Substitute x is equal to x1. When x is equal to x1, substitute here, then that gives you s is equal to 0. When x is equal to x2, it's going to give s is equal to 1. So this mapping is correct. This mapping is correct. If this is correct, I'm going to take derivative on both sides, and I can write like this. Again, this relation is required to change the limits of integration, such kind of stuff. So please take a note of this one. And that is what is written here. In terms of s, the element goes from 0 to 1. And please note that here this beam element is mapped onto a s coordinate system going from 0 to 1. Instead of that, if you want to maintain consistency similar to bar element, if you want to maintain same consistency, you can map it to minus 1 to 1. Only thing is the later whatever relations, they are going to slightly change, but you can take, if you feel you can take care of it, it doesn't matter. Whatever this one range you want, you can map it. Okay, try to understand the procedure. So this is the mapping. This is the mapping. So this x is equal to x1 is same as s is equal to 0. X is equal to x2. X is equal to x2 is same as s is equal to 1. Or this x1 corresponds to s is equal to 0. This x2 corresponds to s is equal to 1. That you keep in mind. Okay. And this now this beam element having two nodes. At each node you have 2 degrees of freedom. What are the 2 degrees of freedom? Transverse displacement and rotation. At both nodes you have. So total 4 degrees of freedom are there. So total 4 degrees of freedom are there for a beam element. You recall how you derived the shape function for a bar element. 2-node bar element has 2 nodes. 2 nodes at 2 nodes. The total degrees of freedom are 2. Only the axial displacement at both the nodes is what is the degree of freedom. So for a 2-node bar element, 2 degrees of freedom are there. So you started out with a polynomial, let u is equal to, let u of x is equal to a0 plus a1x. You remember that? So same thing you need to do here, except that you need to start with a polynomial having same number of coefficients as the number of degrees of freedom, unknown degrees of freedom here. How many degrees of freedom are there for this element? 4 degrees of freedom. So I need to start with a polynomial having 4 coefficients. So I'm going to start with here the transverse displacement is v. I want to work in s coordinate system with an understanding s is equal to 0 at node 1, s is equal to 1 at node 2. So I'm writing polynomial in terms of s in s coordinate system. V as a function of S. What is the polynomial I need to select? I need to select a polynomial having 4 coefficients. I cannot skip the lower order basis terms in the basis function. So the polynomial that I'm choosing is A0 plus A1 S, A2 S square, A3 S cube. Take a note of this polynomial. And since V is in terms of S, you can easily take derivative of this with respect to S. But if you want derivative with respect to X, you need to use chain rule. You need to use chain rule. And that is the reason we developed this relation here. What is the relation between dx and ds? And then you can write a dv over dx is given by this. This procedure of deriving shape functions is very much important. Okay, to understand this procedure is very much important because I told you 2-node element is illustrated here. If you want to derive shape function for 3-node element, 4-node beam element, you can follow the same procedure. Okay, we noted what is V and what is derivative of V with respect to X. And what is V at S is equal to 0? V at S is equal to 0 is V1. V at S is equal to 1 is V2. And this derivative of V with respect to X, derivative of V with respect to X at this location is theta 1. Derivative of V with respect to X at this location is theta 2. Okay. Why we are noting all this? Because there are 4 coefficients here, 4 coefficients to be determined. A0, A1, A2, A3, 4 coefficients. So I require 4 boundary conditions. How do I get the 4 boundary conditions? I am going to equate this V to V1 and V2 at these 2 nodes. I am going to equate this derivative of V with respect to X at both nodes. At this node to theta 1, at this node to theta 2. So that is what is done here. You please take a note of these 2 equations, last 2 equations, at S is equal to 0 and S is equal to 1. When I say please take a note of this, please do it, because if you want to understand clearly, you need to write these things. Please take a note of this 4 equations. Now you have 4 equations, 4 unknowns. You can solve for these 4 unknowns, A0, A1, A2, A3. And these 4 unknowns can be solved and expressed in terms of V1, V2, theta 1, theta 2, and L, length of the element. Please take a note of these 4 equations.
Hello.
Yes. Yes.
Sir, here we are writing trial solution in terms of S only. But in case of truss problem, we wrote it in terms of U only. U is equal to trial solution in terms of U.
What trial solution? We never wrote anything. In there we wrote in terms U is equal to A0 plus A1x. That is what we have written. Here we are writing V is equal to A0 plus, instead of X, we are writing in terms of S.
Okay.
Okay. So instead of X coordinate system, we are writing in terms of S coordinate system. And if you want to rederive all these equations in terms of X coordinate system, you are free to do that. So the thing point is you try to understand the procedure, and then if you want in terms of X, you can rederive all these in terms of X. Okay?
Okay, sir.
So you got 4 equations. You solve these 4 equations. Anyway, first equation is directly giving A0 is equal to V1. Okay? And also second equation is giving you A1 is equal to L times theta 1. And third and fourth equations are in terms of A2, A3. So you can solve those 2 equations for A2, A3. So finally, once you get A0, A1, A2, A3, you plug in back all that information here, and similar to the procedure that you followed for bar element, if you recall, after substituting A0, A1, A2, A3, here we need to group the terms having V1 separately, V2 separately, theta 1 separately, theta 2 separately. We need to group the terms having V1 as common separately, V2 as common separately, theta 1 separately, theta 2 separately. So if you do that here, all that is given here, all that procedure is given. I told you to solve for A2, A3 using the last 2 equations. After solving for A2, A3, you substitute A1, A0, A1, A2, A3 into the starting trial solution for deriving the shape function, and then group the terms having V1 as common separately, V2, theta 1, theta 2. So if you do that and separate out, you can write in this manner. Then you can get what are the interpolating functions or shape functions, whatever terms for which V1 is common. If you group them, that results in N1. Whatever terms that has this theta 1 common, if you group them, that results in N2. Similarly, N3, N4. So N1 corresponds to the shape function for V1, N2 is for, or N1 is shape function for node 1 transverse displacement, N2 is shape function for node 1 rotation, N3 is shape function for node 2 transverse displacement, N4 is shape function for node 2 rotation. And if you want to find what is this N1, N2, N3, they are here. Here N1, N2, N3 are given in terms of S coordinate system, in the parent element coordinate system. Some student asked, if you don't like this, you want it to be in terms of X, you can rederive everything without that mapping, and then find what is this, what these expressions looks like. Okay? So these are the shape functions. What is the important property of shape function that you learned as a part of when you did your bar element? What did you learn? The shape function for bar element, whatever you learned for bar element, I am recapping that. In bar element, you have 2 shape functions, N1, N2. N1 is going to be 1. N1 is going to be 1 at node 1. N1 is going to be 0 at node 2. N2 is going to be 1 at node 2. It's going to be 0 at node 1. Similarly, here the same property is going to be, that same property has to be satisfied by N1 and N3, because N1 is for transverse displacement at node 1, N3 is for transfer displacement at node. So N1 is going to be 1. N1 is going to be 1. At node 1, it's going to be 0 at node 2. In between, it's going to have cubic variation. N3 is going to be 0 at node 2. Sorry, N3 is going to be 0 at node 1. It's going to be 1 at node 2. In between, it's going to have cubic variation. Okay? So if you plot, this is how it looks like. And N2 and N4 corresponds to the rotation shape functions. Okay, they are related to derivative of this transverse displacement. So this is how the plot looks like for N1, N2, N3, N4. So now you got V in terms of transverse displacement in terms of finite element shape functions. You can write it as N transpose D. But if you see this equation, in this equation I require to substitute first derivative or zeroth or transverse displacement, first derivative, second derivative as well. So we need to also take derivative of this with respect to this one. We need to take derivative with respect to x 1 time and 2 times. So quickly I will show you. After that I'm going to stop. So if you take 1 time derivative, this is how it going to look like. If you take 1 time derivative, this is what it looks like. We'll see more details in tomorrow's class. 2 times this is what it going to look like. And this is a second derivative is written as B transpose D. Anyway, I don't want to rush all these things now. So we'll see in tomorrow's class. And whatever we covered, if you have any questions, you can you go through it, and we can get clarifications in tomorrow's class. Okay, thank you. 1 second, let me take attendance. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, sir.